kind of arc I try to go through is sort of education through adventure, because I think that the best place to tell someone more about something is for them to admit that they don't know. And so you kind of need to take them into your world, explain to them what you're doing, how you're doing it, and then you get to the why kind of somewhere in the middle. I don't know if my work has actually changed someone's mind as opposed to open up their hearts.
Hey everyone, I'm David Paul, and I am coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee at the Story Conference with my relatively new good friend, Ben Von Wong. We met last year at another event, and when I saw that you were on the program for this year's event, I had to take the opportunity to get to chat with you. So Ben does amazing impact-based photography, artwork, installations. He's going to explain it far better than I do, but the main reason I wanted to bring Ben to you guys on this channel is because we talk a lot about how to create engaging messaging and engaging environments, but using words and using written word and using speech. And what Ben does is he does it with visuals. He does it with photography. He does it with mind-blowing art installations that we're going to put a few pictures, we'll put some pictures up over this so everybody can see it. So first of all, thank you for giving me some of your time. I appreciate it. For those who don't know you and your work, give us just a little bit of background and how do you define what you do?
So earlier in my career, I defined the work that I do a little bit as photos that look like they're photoshopped. So this sort of hyper-realistic style that you look at and you're not quite sure if it's real or not, so that evokes a sense of curiosity that ideally gets people to want to learn more about it. Lately I've been attaching environmental messages to it, but keeping that same sort of fantastical slant. Probably the best way to describe my work from a visual standpoint is that I try to create work that is familiar yet different. And so perhaps a fun metaphor for that is how a unicorn might appear to a horse. So it's the idea of taking a horse and making it interesting, but not too weird where it had, you know, if you start adding too many things to the unicorn, if it has 8 legs instead of 4, then it might be a little too weird. So it's finding that sweet spot in the middle.
So as you kind of made that transition yourself from photography, where did things start to change for you when you knew that you wanted to make more of an impact, more of a change in the world, and have your work maybe stand for more?
Yeah, I think I just came to the conclusion that with photography, the problem with my work and the inspiration that was being drawn from it was really in the process of how was it created as opposed to the photo itself. The photo itself was just something cool, fantastical, exciting, unique, maybe just art for the sake of art. And the process was where all the inspiration you would draw from, because you would find that relatable or you would learn something from it. You would find the journey inspirational. And so for me, I just wanted that other half of the equation to be equally meaningful. And so the quest to figure out how I could use metaphor, how I could use emotions, how I could use all these little pieces and kind of fuse them together into a single thing. And I stumbled in onto the environmental movement because my girlfriend is actually an environmentalist, and she did it in a very clever way. She dropped an adventure idea on me. She's like, why don't we use storms as a metaphor for climate change? And I was like, okay, so we have to go storm chasing. And of course, as an adrenaline junkie, I think that's an awesome idea. So then that sort of kind of led one thing into another.
Right, so that was the first, is that really the first one that you did of kind of this new style?
Yeah, so putting ordinary people in front of big brewing supercells was kind of my first attempt at using art to raise awareness for something. The second one was where I tied a model underwater, waited for sharks to swim around to raise awareness for shark conservation. And then I think the third that I did was when I put a mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles, which is the number of plastic bottles that the average person might use over the course of their lifetime. And so it's like they're all sort of metaphorical draw-ins into something.
Yeah. So what are you finding is the emotional connection that that's making with people? What kind of feedback have you gotten from people that's letting you know that it is making an impact and it is connecting with people?
I mean, to know that I make an impact, it's always just one-on-one conversations. People are like, as a result of your work, I have stopped doing XYZ, or I have changed the way I do XYZ. Those don't happen nearly often enough. I think a lot of the feedback I get is like, oh, that's so cool, or like, I love that you're doing this, or something like very like superficial. But it's less the feedback that I'm really going for. I think from a creative perspective, the emotion that I try to go for is a combination of shock and awe. I want people to kind of look at something and go like, wow, wait, it's real, or like, wow, what am I looking at? Tell me more. Or this combination of like, I've never quite seen this, so now I need to learn more about it. And then if we dive one step deeper into it, I think the core messaging of what I'm trying to get at is this combination of doing something that is like a paradox, because it's something that is beautiful yet sad, or beautiful yet disturbing, or beautiful yet it shouldn't be beautiful. And so I think that complex emotional journey is what gets people to kind of stick to it a little bit more, whereas if you just do something that's tragic or sad, or like that evokes a sense of despair, those are like passive emotions. Those make you want to like close up, not talk about it anymore, so you don't want to share that.
Right, so the awe of it, that what makes people say your work is so cool, sounds like it's a double-edged sword. That's the kind of work that evokes the positive emotion, gets people to want to pay attention, and yet then it can almost distract from the message because they're so focused on the piece and how grand and spectacular it is that there's really something super important going on underneath.
Yeah, so that's where the video component really comes in, right? So the photos get the instant shock, but then, photo speaks 1,000 words in theory, but you don't get the chance to express yourself, so it's different for every viewer. Whereas in a video, you're stringing together the narrative.
Yeah.
So I feel like those two kind of go hand in hand. So that's kind of how I try to construct it. For blog posts where I try to construct a visual journey, I think Bored Panda is a really great reference for how their platform is designed. It's basically like a picture book. You have a headline, you have a photo, you have a headline, you have a photo, and you have maybe a descriptive paragraph in the middle. But basically it's like a 10-sentence story. What is your 10-sentence story? And those are just done in like little bits and bobs. So it's like, I put a mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles, we found the mermaid online, 50 volunteers showed up, over the course of a couple weeks we cleaned it up, we had to borrow TV from Costco, and so these are like the vignettes into it that just like, ideally each one just kind of makes you wonder, wait, but what? But tell me more.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this drip fed sort of thing.
So let's talk about that from the perspective of influence and persuasion. So you come up with an idea, you put all the work into actually making it, you make it, you photograph it, that's the immediate impact, and then how deliberately are you then crafting the rest of that storytelling experience, and what elements do you know need to be there in order to connect with people to drive the kind of change you want?
I mean, behavioral change is something that I think is really difficult. I mean, the kind of arc I try to go through is sort of education through adventure, because I think that the best place to tell someone more about something is for them to admit that they don't know. And so you kind of need to take them into your world, explain to them what you're doing, how you're doing it, and then you get to the why kind of somewhere in the middle. So hopefully by that point they've been engaged enough to learn a little bit more. I can't say, or I don't know if my work has actually changed someone's mind as opposed to open up their hearts. So I think there's like a difference in strategy if you were to go for one over the other, and I think I focus really more on like expansion as opposed to like change of direction.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to your Dell project, because a lot of viewers of this are going to be in business. They're going to be business people, sales people, marketing people. And that was an engagement where you were hired directly by a company to shine a spotlight on not only an important issue, but how they're tackling it as an initiative. So speaking to business people who are doing business messaging, business communications to influence people and change minds, what did you learn from that experience of working with a big company about trying to communicate that message in a way that was going to be effective?
Actually, Dell was really, really easy to work with. My contact, Sarah Gilliam, there was just super amazing, super easygoing, very understanding. I mean, we had very, very few revisions going back and forth because she has a background in marketing, so she understood there were some things, like, I mean, they have like their corporate CSR talk and like written out in a press report, so like she would give that to me, and I would feed that in, and then I'd like restructure it to make it palatable for like the average person. And so there are certain things that we had to put in there. So like Dell's global recycling program had to be mentioned in the video and so on and so forth. But ultimately, like, they did their internal communications, and then we did our like online organic communication. So we actually like split those two strategies up so that each person could have it said in their own voice. So I got to be the authentic artist who said, I did this project with Dell. By the way, all the stuff that we used came from Dell's global recycling program. And by the way, Dell's actually the largest global recycler in the world, which is super cool, right? Like, this is something positive we all want to talk about. So it kind of allowed for two separate voices to emerge. And then on the flip side, I think the surprising part of the whole campaign, because it was mainly designed as an outward-facing campaign, but the surprise was that the internal reaction from all the internal Dell employees had been extremely positive, because I think for them it gave them a sense of pride to show good work that was being done in a way that was like easy to communicate. Like, they could take that home to their kids and show them, hey, look, we're doing something really cool. And it was a conversation starter as opposed to just yet another CSR press briefing. It was really something that was different, and in many ways unforgettable, because it just stood out so much from what the standard stuff is. And I think there's been a loss of appreciation for things that are memorable. You know, like, if we look at the ads of the 80s and 90s, like, it was all about creating moments and unforgettable experiences and experimenting and being creative, because that's what brands were doing. And now it's sort of shifted into just ROI and conversion rate and so forth. And so a lot of stuff isn't measured. And so sure, you might see it and you might click on it, but did it stick? And so like, the question then becomes, how much would you pay to own a piece of someone's heart? And that, I think, is the place I'm trying to play in.
Right. And it's trying to break through all of the noise today and stop the scrolls of what people are doing. It's all of those things where when everything becomes so formulaic. Right? And it's everyone's following the formula of what's supposed to work, but then when everyone does that, it doesn't work anymore.
Exactly. So.
Talk about the straw project, because that one was visually fascinating. It was the last one of yours that I was able to really follow online. Ben does a brilliant job of really documenting his entire process online. It's a great way of showing behind the scenes of everything from collecting all of this stuff all over the place, and the minutia of having to clean it and corral all these volunteers. So I think another key to your effective communication is the fact that you let people see behind the curtain. There's this beautiful glossy thing that comes out of it, but then here's all the sausage being made behind the scenes. Take us through that a little bit with the straw project and kind of how that works.
Well, I think what people get wrong is that they focus on the outcome as opposed to the journey, because what people relate to is the hard work that goes into making something happen, because with enough money you can make anything happen. It's not the end result that wows people, it's rather how you got there. And so if you show that the process in which it took to get to the final result is authentic, that involved a lot of heart and soul and people and community, then by default it becomes an authentic experience. So with the straw project, I mean, we spent 6 months collecting straws with the help of a nonprofit over there. And so this was straws that were collected by students, by cleanup groups all over the country, and it was all shipped to one central location. Along the way, those who could clean it or rinse it out a little bit did it. But then from there, like, once I landed, it was about taking these huge amounts of straws, which we actually didn't know how many we had. Just an anonymous amount of straws and an anonymous amount of colors, and then we took all of that, sorted it by color to kind of break them down into like, what do we actually have volumetrically, and then we weighed them because we were trying to enter the Guinness Book of World Records. So that's why we know the exact number of straws that we had, because we were just like counting them by weight. Documented that whole process, and then started figuring out the creative side. So like on my end, when we got there, we didn't actually have a builder lined up. We didn't have our lighting set up. Like, these were all experimentations that were happening in real time and documented each step of the way. So I think part of what made that experience so engaging was that we were actually actively asking for help as things were happening on the ground. So we had an end date, just like everything has. We had a deadline, we had a press date, so no matter what, we had to hit this deadline.
You were kind of figuring it out as you went.
But in the middle, we were figuring it out as we went, and that's where that improvisation, that problem solving, that like, oh wait, this is not working, we have to go that way, and sharing that whole thing is what really brings so much to life. And then of course in the end result, like you have the final polished version, you choose which parts of that story to tell. But you see that kind of like it's like watching a piece of clay or Play-Doh and it's just slowly taking shape, or it's watching a sketch artist and watching those brushstrokes slowly get refined. And that's what people really want to see. They don't just need to see another cool thing. There's so many polished stuff out there.
People, they want the authenticity. They crave it, I think, which is how reality TV was born all those years ago and then started to dominate.
And every project has like two stories, right? There's a story of how it happened and the story of what happened. And so there's an opportunity to tell two. I guess the struggle is that most brands only want to fund one or the other. And so you end up in this odd dichotomy where you're just like, no, but let me explain to you how the two work together. And so that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. As we wrap up, let's leave everyone with something tangible that they can take away. If you had to boil down your philosophy, and I don't mean that in a grandiose way, but just as you approach how you're going to go about influencing people, changing minds, having an impact, making change, what do you think are the key elements that have to be there in order for that kind of impact to be had on people?
I think the strongest thing to have is just a causation of X was a problem, art came into play, Y was a result. And I think just achieving this tangible metric of success is going to be critical for any art project to be easily justifiable. I think it's really hard, but I think if you start with an art project with a question of how are you going to measure success, then you can fill in all the gaps in between. If you don't know how you're going to measure it, then the chances that you're going to get there are going to be a little bit wasted.
Well, that totally makes sense, and that applies to everything. I mean, in the business world, it's all about what's the objective and how are you going to be able to measure whether you've actually hit that objective, and then you can reverse engineer from there.
And I think the problem is that many people are looking at art from a conversion metric, but that's sort of like the weakest metric that you can possibly get, because a number of views does not equate the amount of impact the art has had. And so I think that making sure to have a different metric for art is really important, rather than just lobbing it into like distribution and reach and all this other stuff that you're putting your conversion metrics into. I think art has a very different measurement, right? Like if you have art that inspires employees that are walking in every day into a space where they're working more productively, like that's a different quantification, not the number of people that traverse the space, right? You have to measure this stuff differently. And so I think if you are able to redefine those success metrics, then the way you think about the kind of art that you might need will be radically transformed.
And that fits into other things as well. It's all contextual. It's not one size fits all.
Absolutely.
A way to measure one thing isn't necessarily a way to measure another thing, because the way art can have an impact is different than the way something physical and tangible can have an impact. So being contextual, but also being respectful of the medium, I think is super important.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Hey, so where can people find out more about your work, check you out, follow you?
Just Google Von Wong, VONWNG, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and
everywhere.
All the things.
Yeah, we've shown a whole bunch of cool stuff during this video. I'd love to hear in the comments below what you've seen so far in this video that spoke most to you, what jumped out at you, and what key point from Ben really sticks with you as a key takeaway that you think you might be able to apply to your own work. Also, don't forget, over on the Engage Us website, there's a link down below. I've got a cheat sheet on all these different tips and tricks that you can use for all kinds of engagement, customer communications, ways to motivate and influence people. So the link's down below. Make sure you grab that. And Ben, I cannot thank you enough for giving me some of your time. It's been a pleasure getting to know you better, but also just to spend some time here with you. So thank you. All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next time.